The event we have described happened a few days ago in the dim light of the moon. Then the dewdrops sparkled on the field like thousands of diamonds. The heroine of our story stood there at someone's request. The girl had a bad feeling, as if something bad was about to happen to her. The peace of the night was disturbed by the clanking of metal weapons. A hooded silhouette emerged from the darkness. A dark aura emanated from him. His sword glittered, cutting through the night twilight. Two figures in military uniform drew their swords. The infantrymen tried to protect the two women. They whispered to each other about some kavat. The ladies retreated behind the frightened military men closer to the barracks. The number of attackers grew. The hooded horsemen attacked the foot soldiers who were fiercely holding the defense of their camp. Now the clatter of horses' hooves was superimposed on the metallic clanking of weapons. The captain ordered a retreat, but then his chest was treacherously cut by the enemy's sword. The girl in a delicate and airy dress was frightened and trembled all over. She saw how the warriors fought, and timidly asked the nanny what was happening around them. She turned her head to the side at the sound of an approaching horseman. A guy in a cloak rode up to them on a horse with a bloody sword in his hand. Moonlight poured down on him from above. The girl shuddered and involuntarily gasped. She suddenly remembered everything she had heard about him before. His name was Nazar Kavat. Nazar meant blue eyes, and Kavat is a wolf. When the girl met his infamous blue eyes, she immediately realized everything for some reason. The woman called out to Mrs. Rosetta and persistently pulled her hand, trying to take her to safety. But the girl realized that she would never again be able to leave the guy with blue eyes. She thought about running away. The horseman galloped along the path. The girl and her nanny tried to run away from him into the impenetrable thickets of the forest, but the horseman quickly overtook them. Now the girl weighed everything if, after all, maybe that day if she had not listened to someone and had not met that man, that would not have ended up in his captivity. And then everything could have been different. 4 white horses were steadily pulling a white carriage with golden patterns. It was clear that her crew were clearly from the aristocratic elite of society. They drove along a road surrounded by dense green trees. A young lady peeked out from behind the cabin curtain. She was wearing a hat and a dress of a delicate color. She admired the view from the window and called on the woman to join in contemplating the amazing view. Golden hair framed a face with delicate, almost childlike features. Her huge green eyes shone with childish naivety. It was Rosetta Willard Fox. Today was the day of her release. For the first time, the landscapes she saw from the carriage window brought her into complete delight. She finally felt freedom for the first time in her life. And this feeling was simply amazing. At some point, she closed her eyes and, resting her head on her hand, began to enjoy the smell of fresh grass. 4 horses carried away a carriage with a happy girl along the road. She was finally free from everything that was holding her down. Since childhood, she was constantly told the same thing. Her father assured her that his Rosetta didn't have to do anything, that as a princess, she must maintain honor and dignity. He asked his daughter not to worry about anything anymore. After all, he will do everything else himself. The girl convinced that she too wanted to do business like her brother and older sister. But her father replied that when the time comes, there will be a job for her too. But I thought it was too early. The girl grunted in disagreement at his statements and tried to speak out against him. A sacred land that monsters could not approach. The sacred kingdom of the fox, and the man ruling this kingdom was her father. Under the wing of such a father, our heroine grew up without needing anything. The palace, servants, education, luxurious dresses, the love of her parents. She had everything in full. But this was not what the princess truly desired with all her heart. Her older sister, who showed herself early in politics and magic and became the crown princess, and her elder brother, having received the rank of commander of the knightly order at the age of 20 for his success in fencing. And therefore, looking at her elders, our heroine also wanted to achieve something on her own. However, her fate was decided differently. One day, over a cup of tea, the parents told their daughter that they were going to marry her to Mr. Icy. The girl involuntarily shuddered at what she heard. The king, with a smile on his face and sadness in his eyes, told the girl that she was already old enough to get married. And after listening to her father, one thought suddenly came to the princess's head. That if she were like her brother and sister, perhaps she would have another path other than marriage. And now when this journey ends, she will have to get married. The carriage rocked rhythmically, and the girl was a little tired of contemplating the views and lowered her head a little sad. After all, she couldn't do anything, and all they gave her was this trip, so she was going to try as many things as possible so she wouldn't have any regrets. Their carriage jumped on a rock, and the already middle-aged woman who was accompanying the girl hit her. She already suffered from motion sickness during the trip. The girl suggested that the nanny go out to get some fresh air. The woman felt sick and her head was simply pounding. She was already at that age when long trips and walks were harmful and painful. It seemed to her that she was going to die. The princess reproached the nanny for insisting on going with her. She reminded her that she had previously warned her that it would be hard for her. The woman made excuses that this was due to the fact that the place of the processional journey suddenly changed. The girl made excuses that the original path did not pass near the sea, and she so wanted to see him at least once in her life. The woman was wiping away the sweat that appeared on her face with a handkerchief. She said that after all, when traveling to such a place, they should have been careful. The princess was surprised. She argued that the Basque lands had long been annexed to the kingdom, but the nanny continued to sigh and groan heavily. The girl could not understand what was bothering her so much. The accompanying knight of the princess rushed towards the carriage like the wind. The girl greeted Alan. The guy helpfully asked Mrs. Rosetta what her orders and instructions would be. The girl reported that her nanny was worse than they expected, and she asked the knight if he had medicine. He replied that he gave it away before departure. The nanny considered the guy a scoundrel. She told him that she did not feel any better from that remedy. He retorted that he was not a doctor, but a knight of His Majesty. Alan explained to the woman that she accepted him just like that, and he told her not to take it on an empty stomach. The woman was sulking and angry at him. She was surprised that it was all because of this, and she asked what to do now. She shook her fist at him and called him a cunning man. The guy claimed that everything was due to a violation of the instructions for use. The nanny was already starting to have steam coming out of her ears from irritation, that they were starting to teach her about life. And the princess, seeing this, thought it was time to stop it, before the nanny got even more angry. The girl suggested that Alan and the nanny stop the carriage and rest a little in the fresh air, stretch their legs and take a walk. The coachman stopped the carriage near the shore. Okay, knights and servants adjusted the harness on their horses and inspected the carriage. The princess and her nanny approached from the very shore, enjoying the coolness of the water and fresh air. The girl was cheerful. She cheerfully asked the woman if she began to feel at least a little better. The nanny was sitting on the shore. She answered in the affirmative, and she complained that, as she had expected, traveling at her age was already harmful to health. The girl reminded the one who had previously warned about this. She asked if the nanny really went with her because she was afraid of her running away. The woman replied that the girl did not want to get married. The princess assured that although she did not welcome this, she had already agreed on everything with her father and was not going to let him down. That she will get married immediately after her return. Nanny was happy. Her complexion even improved. She said that the girl finally changed her mind and thought that everything was right, that Mr. Isel will love and take care of her all his life. Prince Isel Scallion was the next heir to the Archduchy of Helen. He had a kind character and attractive appearance. The nanny told the princess that if she were in her place, she would immediately marry this guy without hesitation. She believed that a better groom could not be found. The girl did not argue with her because she considered it useless. The woman became sad. She said that since the girl knew this, then was it worth insisting on this useless journey? The princess saw that her nanny understood nothing at all. She asked why she couldn't. She considered it unfair that her brother and sister could do everything, but she was only forbidden to do everything. The woman saw the girl's sadness. She took her hands in hers, and now she understood why her ward was so worried. She replied that for their parents they will always remain children, that the younger ones are always looked after more than the older ones. The girl noticed that the nanny was talking, and I was glad that she felt better. She told her that if the carriage had already been prepared, then they could slowly walk towards it. The water near the shore began to tremble. The princess was the first to notice this. A horsewoman was galloping towards them. It was clear that this man was clearly in a hurry. The princess noticed that they seemed to be galloping in such a hurry towards them. A girl shouted something to them from afar. The nanny asked the lady if she understood what language the rider was speaking. The girl tried to listen. The princess only now saw that the rider was a woman, and I was amazed at how fearlessly she rode on a horse. Her eyes sparkled with delight. She had no idea that women could ride horses so skillfully. The horsewoman shouted, "Run!" Her horse clopped its hooves rhythmically along the road. Hair tied in a ponytail fluttered in the wind. Suddenly her hiss was heard, and soon our company saw a snake-like monster. He was simply huge. 4 eyes burned with red fire, and the scales glistened with mother-of-pearl. An unexpected gust of wind blew the hat off the princess's head. She bent down to pick up her headdress. Knight Alan shouted to the lady to be careful and on the alert, warning her of imminent danger. As soon as Alan heard the rider, he realized what kind of language it was. But he did not understand that he was screaming until he saw the monster. The snake loomed menacingly over the princess and her nanny. Her poisonous teeth were huge and curved like sabers. Our heroine was trembling with fear. Never before in her life had her life been threatened, and she lived in complete carefreeness. The princess realized that she would never return home and said goodbye to her life. The rider caught up with them and reared her horse. A precisely timed blow hit the snake in the head. Blood gushed out of her. The creature made terrible sounds of pain, and the rider was already standing on the shore with her foot, completing her jump from the horse. The girl, having made a huge leap, was already next to the princess and her nanny. She looked over her shoulder. Having disturbed the water, there was a huge monster. The knights only now managed to run to the mistress's aid. They asked her if she was okay. Alan felt the girl, checking if she was safe and asking if she was injured. After all, a tragedy almost happened. She replied that everything was fine with her. But there was something about the rider. The girl sat and felt her leg. It was clear that she had injured herself in some way during that jump. She had a stabbing sensation in her shins, and no matter how she twisted her leg, the pain did not go away. The princess approached her and began to mutter something inaudibly. The princess remembered how the girl rushed. She clearly shouted to them in a different language, and therefore they did not understand her. That's why I asked where it was from. And does he know her language? The girl replied that there are few people here who do not speak Latin. She was surprised at the appearance of the monster, and she was sure that he would not have appeared if they were local residents. She reported that this lake was simply teeming with monsters. That's why all the locals avoid it. Rosetta only now realized that monsters and the truth exist. She clenched her fists in fear and horror. She read that monsters appear and disappear throughout the continent. But this never concerned the sacred lands of the kingdom, and one could see such monsters only in books. The knights approached and introduced themselves. They blamed themselves for not having time, and they expressed words of gratitude to the girl who saved their mistress. She answered them politely and modestly. She assured that she would help anyone. The princess assured her that she was obliged to reward the savior. Noticing that she had injured her leg, she asked how she felt. The girl stood up to her full height on both legs, but limped heavily, unable to overcome the stabbing pain. She assured me that it looked like a dislocation. Knight Alan offered his services as a healer and asked her permission to examine his injured leg. The princess asked to allow the girl to examine her legs. She convinced that Alan was well versed in this. She agreed, provided that it would not be difficult and would not be difficult for the knight. The brown-haired woman was sitting on a round soft chair from the carriage. Alan examined her leg and said it looked like a bone fracture. He assured me that it should heal soon if I don't strain for a while. The woman couldn't believe it. She asked the knight how sure he was of this. He smiled and said that he was completely sure. After all, how could he misdiagnose the one who saved him? The girl was surprised to hear this, but he argued that if anything had happened to the mistress, it would have been the end of them all. Then everyone would get angry, and in all the fields. But Rosetta did not let him finish, covering his mouth with her hand. She said he was great. She offered to get home quickly. She recalled his promise and their agreement before leaving, that while they were traveling, they would keep the fact that she was a princess a secret. She asked Alan to believe her. The ladies were all together in the carriage. The knight rode nearby on horseback. The girl thanked, assuring that she did not have enough words to express herself. The blonde assured that she simply had to take her. After all, it was because of them that she injured her leg, and she simply could not do otherwise. The brown-haired girl noticed that it was already late and cordially offered to stay with her for the night. The princess insisted that they were already in her debt, and she asked whether this would be too arrogant on their part. She assured that they were guests from afar, and this would be quite appropriate. The brown-haired woman warned that it might be a little noisy at night, that if it suits them, then everything is fine. She began to feel sad. The princess asked her what could happen at night. It turned out that the wedding was supposed to take place that evening. The girl claimed that in their tribe they always hold weddings at night. She asked her to forgive her for being late with her greetings. I imagined that her name was Rosie. The brown-haired woman revealed the secret that her father is the leader of the Basque tribe. Rosetta was extremely surprised by this. These places have long become the lands of the Adran, and over time they were divided among several tribes. In the north are the Quat, in the west are the Croix, and in the east are the Basques. The Basque tribe swore absolute loyalty to the kingdom. They were the strongest. Rosetta asked the nanny, didn't they consider the capital to be quite remote from here, and that the road here will be difficult? Rosie confirmed this. She claimed that she entered the field because of today's wedding. It was an old tradition to hold a wedding in a field. The girl assumed that now everyone in the camp was probably panicking and looking for her. After all, she was just going to get some air, and she still hasn't returned yet. In addition, she also seriously injured her leg. The princess understood that because of them the bride had suffered, and I tried to figure out what they should do now. Rosie admitted to her new acquaintances that, to tell the truth, she did not want to get married. That her future husband is 30 years older than her, and so she jumped on her horse and rode away. The girl said that in order to increase the strength of the tribe, an alliance was needed, and marriage was chosen in order to cement the agreement of support. But the Kwa leader soon died, and the decision to marry Rosie was made very quickly. Her opinion, of course, had no significance in resolving this issue. The princess thought that the girls' unwanted marriage made them so similar. She was deep in thought. Rosie apologized to the ladies for talking so much, and she asked the blonde to tell her a little about herself if it wouldn't be difficult for her. The girl introduced herself as Rosetta, that she was going to the sea to help her father's store. The nanny shuddered that her ward called herself by her real name. The brown-haired girl praised her new friend that she was such a good daughter and helped her father. The nanny wiped sweat from her face. I'm glad the girl used a fake identity, as they agreed. Their company heard the sounds of gunshots or explosions in the distance. They stopped, listening and peering into the already descending darkness of the night. A guy jumped out of the tent. He saw Mrs. Rosie first. The girls also rejoiced at her arrival. Alan dismounted, and the ladies got out of the carriage. And now the knight escorted the ladies to a safe place to spend the night. The guy was nervous and told the lady that everyone was looking for her, and they already thought that something bad had happened to her when she did not return home by sunset. But the girl claimed that something did happen. She walked with a strong limp on her right leg and approached her father. The leader was unpleasantly surprised by this event. He began to yell at his daughter for her indiscretion on such an important day for them, and without embarrassment that many people could see them, he hit his daughter in the neck. The princess and her small retinue were horrified by such rude treatment of a young girl by a man, and he continued to shout at the girl. He asked what she was doing that she appeared in this form. Rosie, still after the heavy slap, continued to sit on the ground. She asked to forgive her. The father was furious and did not accept her words of forgiveness. He accused that the scoundrel wanted to destroy their entire tribe with her short-sighted actions. He asked what she was thinking about, that she decided to ruin the marriage union of the tribes just like that. Alan could not stand such attacks on the girl. He asked the man to stop and stop scolding her already. I thought it was cruel that the leader did not even listen to his daughter. Rosetta also joined in, assuring that what happened was her fault. Alan helped Rosie to her feet and supported her to ease the pain of walking. The tribal leader stood surrounded by his people. He narrowed his eyes angrily, and in front of him, full of determination, stood the lonely, fragile figure of the princess. The people of the tribe whispered. The menacing man asked the blonde who she was, and judging by her clothes, I assumed that she was definitely not from the locals. The girl answered that they were travelers from the kingdom of the fox. She explained that his daughter was injured while saving her from a monster from the lake. She sincerely offered her help to him and his tribe. The leader of the tribe was surprised that bandaging them could help in any way. After all, his daughter probably won't be able to ride a horse in this condition. Alan whispered to the lady that it seemed they were still following the old traditions, that a woman is kidnapped and hidden, a rite of abduction. This tradition has already been banned, but it seems they still follow it like in the old days. And after negotiations with the bride's relatives, the groom puts her on a horse and takes her away. And now it was clear what trouble they had caused. The leader and his comrades looked angrily at the uninvited guests. The princess asked if it was possible to somehow persuade the groom's side to make concessions. After all, it was possible to postpone the wedding due to the bride's injury. The man replied that this was impossible, and this definitely won't happen. He asked his daughter Rosie to wait for him in the room. He reminded her that she would also have to explain herself to their tribe. The two-room apartment timidly answered with consent. Rosetta came to the aid of her savior. I asked her how she was feeling. Already in the room, the princess asked if they could cancel the wedding, but Rosie replied that then the groom's side would not count her. After all, they were already in a hurry, and if they ask to reschedule, then suspicions will arise. She reported that the groom's side was the Kruta tribe, and they constantly worry and don't trust. After all, with whom else could they conclude an alliance, except between them and the Kruta tribe? And if at least something disrupts this wedding, then they will definitely refuse and will unite with the Kavat tribe. Rosie was sure that the wolf attacking you was worse than the lion sleeping in the distance. The princess realized that the Kwat tribe was more feared than the kingdom that stood behind it. Everyone knew that these lands had long been under the rule of the most powerful kingdom on the continent. Therefore, the people who lived here, in addition to their native language, also used Latin. But recently, on the opposite side of the kingdom, another developing country has slowly begun to gain strength. And in comparison to the northern Khitan peoples, who were known for their ferocity, they had a more cruel and soulless character. That is why the kingdom persuaded them to guard the borders of the state. This task was more suitable for such ferocious warriors than anyone else. And now the Kwat tribe was gaining strength. They were actively uniting with other tribes, and this began to frighten. Rosie was especially frightened by the army led by the young leader. They defeated even the fierce Khatanas. The name Nazar Kvat was also known to the knight, but Rosie said that everyone calls him Blue-Eyed Wolf. That young man had a cold gaze, and Kvat meant wolf. There was a rumor that his eye color corresponded to his name. Rosie claimed that blue eyes were not uncommon in that tribe. That's why they talk so much about him. The princess was surprised that Alan knew about that leader. He confirmed that this was the case, and I had heard well that he was fiercer than the monster from the lake. That during the war that man was merciless to others. He did not spare his enemies and took no prisoners. And his sword did not know fatigue. The knight heard that people were talking about the cruelty of that leader, as if he had neither blood nor tears. Rosie said she knew all this. Therefore, they decided to unite with the Kwa tribe through marriage. They had thoughts of resisting him, but if the marriage fails, they will be isolated. According to her, many tribes already went over to the side of the Kwat. Rosetta realized that everything here was already too confusing and complicated. She thought about possible ways to fix everything. Suddenly a bright thought struck her. What if you use a double wearing the bride's dress? She hoped it was dark enough now, and under the veil it will be difficult to understand who is behind it. The nanny was surprised at this option. Rosie agreed that this was a perfectly acceptable option. The princess was glad that she managed to find a solution. After all, when the holiday begins, the bride and groom will go to the newlyweds' room. Then it was possible to change the bride. Rosetta only doubted whether there would be problems with her wedding night. After all, the bride had a broken leg. Alan smiled slyly. He believed that the main thing was that the groom did not attack. The knight was sure that if the groom drank at the wedding, then everything was possible. The ladies didn't understand what he was getting at. He explained that if the groom had too much alcohol, he would no longer have time for the bride. The knight's nanny pinched him painfully on the back. The already middle-aged woman reproached the guy that he should not say such things in front of his mistress, and there was a possibility that alcohol would only increase the leader's strength. The only option left was with a double. Rosie nodded in agreement. Alan's eyes were round with surprise and confusion. The princess claimed that they had very little time left. She called for everyone to be called to the girl as soon as possible in order to choose from among them the most successful option for a double. From the tent you could hear out, and the woman left her. It turned out that she did not have the right build and was overweight. The other did not qualify because she was already old. The task turned out to be much more difficult than the girls initially thought. They were unable to find even a slightly more suitable type among the candidates. The blonde encouraged Rosie to find more people, but that was all. After all, she took only her servants into the field with her. Rosetta was confused. After all, they wouldn't have any other options. But they had nowhere to find a slender, long-haired girl. The ladies around were whispering. Rosetta wondered why everyone started looking at her like that. The brown-haired woman began to persuade her, holding her hand. Rosie asked the girl to become her double. The princess's nanny was categorically against such an idea. She expressed her protest with clenched fists. Rosetta was already in her bridal outfit. She told the woman that nothing could be done, that they have already agreed on everything. She believed that nothing bad should have happened to her. The nanny was worried about the girl, that she didn't know how to ride a horse very well and could fall off the horse. But she assured that everything would be fine, and she wouldn't get hurt. After all, everyone here rode horses from an early age. The woman begged Mrs. Rosetta. She begged her not to take part in the main role of bride kidnapping. The girl claimed that this was part of the local culture and tradition. Moreover, this is not a kidnapping at all, but an imitation of it. The woman asked the princess to think about what would happen if they found out about this in the kingdom. The girl was absolutely sure that no one would find out. After all, the nanny won't tell. And Alan, too, as an interested person, should not have told anyone about this. After all, it was because of him that she almost died. Therefore, the girl asked the nanny to keep everything a secret. But the woman continued to object to Mrs. Rosetta. The lame Rosie came in and was amazed. She told the girl that her wedding attire suited her so well. She politely thanked her for the compliment. Rosetta asked the brown-haired woman for her permission, a little late, to wear this dress. The girl assured that of course it was necessary. I guessed that it must be very difficult, and she was grateful to the girl for her help. She hugged the blonde out of excess of feelings. Without unclenching the hug, the leader's daughter once again thanked him for his help. She assured that she would never forget this. Then she gave the girl something. She led her under the open sky from which the full moon was shining. She said that she would need to stand here with a lantern, and she hid nearby so that the groom's side would not notice her. A harnessed horse stood nearby. The lit lantern was in the blonde's hand. Rosie told her that the stars were looking for a bride around the world. Rosetta was pleased with the beauty around her. The woman assured the lady that everything was not as she thought, but the girl claimed that the nanny was simply too worried. The nanny asked in surprise how she could not worry. She asked her to take it with her, grabbed the girl's hand, and put a short woman's dagger into it. She advised her to use it if her life was suddenly in danger. The bride's double checked the dagger, taking it out of its sheath. The girl asked how she could use it. The woman advised to hit with this weapon where it hurts most. The princess looked at the short dagger, turning it in her hands. The girl hid the dagger in the hem of her dress, securing it to the garters. She assured the nanny that this would not happen so that she would have to defend herself. And she asked her where Alan had gone, that he had not been seen for a long time. The woman said that he went to get alcohol for the groom, that he was in a hurry to return at the beginning of the ceremony. The princess was surprised by the knight's participation in the idea, since she expected that he would initially be against it. The princess was going to thank Alan when he returned. The nanny remembered the guy telling her something. That for the first time I saw a girl who so desperately wanted to do something and be useful. But he promised to do whatever she wanted for her during this journey. The woman said that the knight wanted to support the girl's position. And now the princess realized why Alan was always so calm when she insisted on something. The girl bowed her head and lowered her gaze and said that she did not know about it. And she expressed her deep gratitude to the two of them for their help, support, and active participation. Suddenly a shot sounded, and many horses' hooves deafened the surrounding area with their clattering hooves. A guy from the camp with a torch in his right hand asked who was going there. He ordered them to stop. The mounted riders silently drew their swords. The girl turned her head around and asked the nanny what those sounds were. The woman still didn't hear anything because she was old. The princess heard a cry for help in the darkness. The men from the camp crossed swords with the intruders. Peering into the darkness, the ladies saw a fight. It seemed to the nanny that it was from the groom's side. The sounds of battle became more and more distinct. The princess was alarmed by the call for help. Then she heard the call "Quat" from the noise. Both ladies became wary and tensed their whole bodies, realizing that something had not gone according to plan. The campfighters shouted to each other that Kavat was attacking them. The horseman with the shining sword was as fast as the wind. He destroyed everyone in his path. Very soon a retreat was ordered, and the defenders of the camp fled in all directions, leaving Rosetta and the nanny alone. The horsemen caught up with the fleeing people and shot them in the back to death. Blood spattered on their animal skins and clothes. The princess shuddered. A long-haired, blue-eyed young horseman with a bloody sword stopped in front of her. She remembered that Nazar meant blue eyes, and the rider just had narrowed eyes of a deep, clear blue color, and Kavat meant wolf. And now it was clear to the girl that in front of her was the same Nazar Kavat. The nanny pulled her by the hand and assured her that they needed to escape from here as quickly as possible. But the horsemen approached them faster than the ladies had time to make a decision. The nanny hurried the mistress, but she was rooted to the ground from fright. At some point, the girl and her nanny began to run away, picking up the hem of their dresses. But this was not an obstacle for the rider to carry out his plan. One of the guardmen stood up for the fleeing ladies, blocking the horse's path with a drawn sword at the ready. But soon the daredevil was struck down by the horseman with just the lightning-fast movement of his sword. Blood once again sprinkled the rider and his steed. The ladies did not do very well in their running. The horseman was soon overtaking them. His blue eyes sparkled in the darkness. At full gallop, the hooded man reached out and grabbed the girl by the waist. He pulled her towards him. The girl extended her hand to the nanny, asking her for help. But the already middle-aged woman was powerless to help her with anything. She ran after the mistress until she tripped over a stone and fell flat on the ground. The horseman rode away, taking the princess in an unknown direction, and only her wedding veil remained lying on the ground. The rider galloped along the forest road at a full gallop. The girl demanded that he stop now. She insisted that she was not the bride. The man told her to sit quietly and not struggle if she didn't want to fall off the horse, and he hugged her tighter to himself. The girl involuntarily groaned as the vice intensified. She began to tremble, and she asked to be released. I understood that there was no need to anger him even more, but she didn't understand what he told her. The blue-eyed man in the hood turned his head to the girl and was surprised that she did not understand him. Afterwards, he realized that she only understood Latin. The moon illuminated the horse's path. He spoke in a language she could understand, that if she doesn't want to fall and break her neck, she should sit quietly and quietly. The girl became scared. The guy caught up with them. He addressed the horseman Riga. He reported that there was no pursuit of him. It was unexpected. He thought that they would try to return the bride. Blue-Eyed asked how far away the people on the groom's side were. The guy replied that they were coming right behind them. Another horseman was approaching. He told Riga that everything was done as he ordered. A malicious, sly smile was visible from under his hood. He was taking off his hood. He said that their qua idiots, when they hear Riga's name, immediately begin to tremble. The guys laughed contentedly. Blue-Eyed said that his guys were great, ordered everyone to return to their camp. They answered yes exactly, accepting the order of their chief. The animal hooves thundered rhythmically along the road again. The princess now only realized that she had been kidnapped instead of Rosie. She understood that she needed to try to start a conversation. She began to assure him that she was not a bride at all, but just wanted to help her. The assistant riding next to her did not believe her. The girl was surprised that he knew Latin. She insisted that she was only the bride's double, but he didn't believe it, answering that she was lying to them very truthfully and smoothly. The guy with dark eyes couldn't believe that a double could be used at a wedding on which the future of the tribe depended. The princess was even more frightened that no one believed her here. Another asked Riga what to do with the girl now. He offered to pick her up himself. After all, he was not interested in women. Another one rode up on a donkey. He asked if he could go first. I asked Krell why his guys were silent. The other replied that there was no need to rush so much. After all, Riga himself has not yet decided what to do with this girl. A third joined this opinion, and he assumed that their leader might still have mercy on the beauty. The one who was going to take the girl for himself furiously replied that he should not be made fun of. After all, their leader is not the type to drool over a woman, and he advised them to remember what her father had done for their tribe. He recalled the law, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The law of the Quat tribe is to return the favor. Others began to whisper and support him. The princess did not understand what they were saying in a language she did not understand. She was shaking. She didn't want to die right here. The blue-eyed leader barked, "That's enough." He told his guys that this girl would become his wife. A hubbub spread through the crowd of warriors. They asked again what he said, and they couldn't believe their ears. One dared to ask Riga if he was completely crazy, reminded him that this was the daughter of the Basque leader. He considered it nonsense and reminded him of past losses. After all, their tribe faced everything because of them. I was surprised at the leader's decision to throw in his lot with this girl. but the flow of his words was interrupted by the tip of a sword aimed at his throat. Blue-Eyed coldly asked Krell who gave him the right to contradict his leader and when. After all, behind the Basques stood the kingdom of Fox, and now they had the opportunity to fight them. And he asked not to put the entire tribe at risk because of his unbridled anger and short-sighted actions. The leader asked, still holding the girl close to his people, which of them had something against him. I asked that greyhound daredevil to take a step forward. Krell chuckled offendedly. He answered that he had not thought and asked to be forgiven for his temper. It was only then that Rosetta realized what they were talking about and asked them to stop. She protested against the wedding, and she did not agree that her fate was being decided here without her consent. Blue-Eyed answered a question with a question. Was that marriage of her choice from which he stole her tonight? The girl shuddered and could not really answer him. That day the guy asked the princess if she wanted to marry him. Isel wanted to have an open conversation with his future bride about making a decision about her marriage. The girl treated the guy well. He was like family to her. But she also had a hard time accepting that he would become her husband. She clenched her fists from suppressed emotions. The guy assured her not to worry, that after the wedding he will not force her to do anything she does not want. He promised that he would wait for her to be ready for a real marriage with him, no matter how long it took. The princess still couldn't do anything, and they galloped until Riga ordered a halt. He was sure that his people were tired and suggested they rest here. The man helped the girl off the horse to the ground. Noticing that she was not going in the direction of the broken tents, he grabbed her hand and asked where she was going. The girl looked at him with pleading eyes and asked if he could let her go. She mumbled that she still couldn't ride a horse and therefore wouldn't be able to run far from them. Riga was surprised by this statement. He said that living mixed with people from the kingdom you could lose your essence. But I couldn't imagine that it was so bad. The wind blew through my hair. Riga said that according to rumors, the daughter of the Basque leader was brown-haired, and the girl had golden hair. The girl looked the man in the eyes and said that he was completely right, and I wanted to explain everything to him. But they were killed. The assistant told Riga that everything was ready. The guy said it was time for them to go. The full moon illuminated the clearing. The girl did not understand where they were going to take her. She began to resist and scream that she did not want to go anywhere. But they pushed her in the back, waving their arms. Rosetta asked the man where they were taking her. He pulled her by the hand. She asked to let her go. The guys around were laughing. They said that they had come across a very lively bride and would have to tinker with her. The girl was trembling. She understood that this was her complete failure. After all, she herself will not be able to escape from them. And she didn't know what to do now. The dagger fell to the floor, clinking gently. The guy blew out the candle. The girl screamed that no one should approach her. The man took off his shirt, exposing his muscular torso. She demanded that the barbarian leave her alone. The man tied his hair into a ponytail with a blue ribbon. The girl screamed at him to get out of here. He answered her that she was very talkative. The princess was trembling all over. She asked not to touch her. She promised to carry out any of his orders. The man took a step towards her and grabbed her hand. She groaned at the rough treatment. She started screaming that she didn't want to. The man pushed the girl onto her back. She asked to be released, calling him a dirty savage. But he asked her to scream even louder so that everyone could hear them. His face was above hers and his black hair fell onto her cheek. The girl did not understand his desire to hear the cry. Then he told her in her ear that he would let her go if she did as he said. She nodded obediently in response. Although later I wasn't sure that they would let her go, and that they wouldn't do anything bad. The man held her by the shoulders, not allowing her to get out of bed. The girl was surprised that this was the same Nazar Kvat, whom they had heard about as a bloodthirsty, ferocious, and merciless monster. She could not judge his cruelty in battle now, but during the war he was merciless towards other tribes, and yesterday they certainly did not suspect such a threat. She was preparing a dagger. The girl told herself that this was her chance, but the man deftly grabbed her hand with the weapon. He was surprised because he could not even think that the bride would prepare such a surprise on her wedding night, and he looked reproachfully into her eyes. Now the girl realized that she had screwed up with his murder, and now it will definitely come to an end. The man examined and praised a small, well-forged dagger. He assured that this would save them from problems. The girl asked him for mercy. Riga claimed that the sharpness of this dagger could now be tested. The girl screamed in fear. Fast and dexterous movement of a trained hand. and drops of blood were already on the floor in the girl's dress, flowing from the wound on the man's hand. She screamed in fright what he was doing, and the blood continued to drip onto her clothes. The man clamped his hand tightly over her mouth. He whispered that she had better be quiet, especially if he doesn't want everyone from outside to come running here. The girl nodded in agreement. She realized that they could be heard outside and that there could be other people nearby. And this performance was to drive out the servants. And still it was not clear what was on his mind. Alan rode to the Basque camp. The seriously wounded and killed lay side by side on the ground. He tried to understand what happened here. After all, they only agreed to stage the kidnapping. The knight accompanying the princess dismounted from his horse. He took out his sword, walked and called Mrs. Rosetta. He prayed that nothing would happen. I looked around. Suddenly a woman's voice called him by name. It was the nanny, and next to her was Rosie. And then he was simply shocked. She asked him reproachfully where he had been for so long. The nanny told Alan with grief in her voice and horror in her eyes that their mistress had been kidnapped. He couldn't believe his ears. He blamed the groom's side for everything that was going on. Rosie insisted it wasn't them. The guy was completely at a loss. The girl said that Rosetta was kidnapped by Nazar Kavat. She assumed that by doing this, he wanted to prevent the union of their tribes. Alan sighed heavily. He thought that it couldn't have been worse than the Kavat tribe. He turned his head sharply towards Rosie. He said that she should help them. He asked to gather all the men who could fight. He was going to catch up with the kidnappers in the tracks of their horses. The leader argued that this was not necessary. The guy turned his head towards the speaker. A heavy-set man stomped towards them. He said it would be even better this way. His daughter didn't understand what he was talking about. He narrowed his eyes. He was sure it was even better that the enemy tribe had captured the fake, and he told his daughter to go get ready. He claimed that he would continue preparing for the wedding. The girl began to contradict him. She accused him, how could he say that? After all, an innocent person suffered. The leader was glad about this, since his daughter was able to avoid that terrible fate. The girl began to scream furiously that it all happened because of him, that he was the first to kidnap a woman from the Kavat tribe. And now they want to take revenge on him for the past. The leader made a jerk and hit the girl in the ear. He said that she didn't know anything to accuse him of anything, that she is still alive only because he is protecting her. The man began to shout that everything was happening only for the sake of their tribe. He assured that he had not done anything bad or dirty, but only because of this the kingdom supports them and stands behind them like a mountain. He accused his daughter of living and not knowing grief, and even daring to accuse him of something. What a girl should think about the times when their tribe will prosper. That marriage is something she must do for the sake of all the people, and he ordered her to go get ready. Rosie contemptuously asked her father to tell him how it all happened, that the truth was that he was greedy. She didn't believe that he kidnapped the woman and killed her husband just for the sake of the future of their tribe. Although all this happened before she was born, the girl knew everything very well. And everyone in the tribe knew where the leader got the scar on his face, that it was put there by the woman who was so violated. The man, in the heat of the moment, was already preparing to raise his hand over the girl to strike, but he was held confidently by another man. It was Alan. He insisted that he was not at all interested in what was going on here, but he understood that the leader was clearly not going to cooperate with him, and he was going to go in search of the girl alone. The guy whistled and his faithful horse was already rushing towards him. Alan was determined to save the princess. The knight's foot stood in the stirrup. He easily saddled the noble horse. I told the nanny not to worry. Alan reminded that he was a knight of his majesty, and he simply had to return the princess at any cost. The leader was surprised to hear princess. He even asked again. And only now I saw the pattern on Knight Alan's sword. After all, these gold patterns were used in only one place, and this was the sacred kingdom of Lisa. This was the place where the descendants of the heavenly Elheim ruled. Holy land under divine protection, which monsters cannot reach. It turned out that these patterns denoted the kingdom of the fox, and in that kingdom there was one prince and two princesses. The leader suggested with horror that this girl could be one of their number. He gasped just from such a guess. This girl could be Rosetta Willard Fox. Alan confirmed this, that she is the princess of a sacred kingdom, and that was another name for his mistress. The man cursed to himself. He clenched his teeth. He asked himself what would happen if the princess got hurt. After all, the barbarians could do anything to the girl. And then the future of his tribe was in jeopardy. The kingdom could have simply burned them down, leaving only a handful of ashes in the wasteland. His man came running and shouted, "Trouble!" It turned out that people from the groom's side were returning to the lands of Kwa. The man did not understand how and why. After all, they had an agreement about the wedding. The guy said that they abandoned the wedding. That the Kavad had a hand in this too. The leader was nervous but could not do anything about this situation. A representative of the Kvat tribe reported that they had stolen the bride, and if the tribe wants her back, they must come to them themselves. The guy was sure that if he continued to insist on the wedding, this could mean the start of a war between the tribes. The leader bared his teeth and said that the Quats had always been beggars. He was shaking with anger. Alan was still sitting in the saddle, watching the unfolding picture from above. He noted aloud that the leader was confused. He turned his head to the knight. The guy believed that it would be better for them to cooperate in saving the princess, and then he will consider everything that the leader has done up to this point to be a mistake. The man, gritting his teeth, replied that he could do nothing but agree. He ordered his men to take their swords and prepare for battle. He ordered to catch this man and not let him leave. Rosie was surprised and asked her father what he was doing. And the guards had already surrounded Alan on horseback, drawing their swords. His stake reared up. The guy asked what the leader was up to. He insisted on the need to find the princess. The leader asked again. He believed that even if the girl was a princess, it would still not make it any easier to find her. The man generally doubted that the girl was still alive. The Kavat tribe were obsessed with revenge. They definitely won't let her go so easily. And all they had to do was destroy all the evidence. Alan told himself that although he was angry now was not the time to react to these words. He believed that he needed to get out of here as quickly as possible and find the princess. His foot was in the stirrup. He shouted at the horse, and the sword in his hand glowed with a bright yellow light. The guy waved it in front of the guards. Alan shouted for them to clear his way if they didn't want to die. The golden light from the sword spread across the clearing. The leader ordered to stop the knight in any way, and whoever retreats will come to the end. The girl shouted, ordering the knight to drop his sword. He looked over his shoulder at her voice. Rosie said that if he didn't drop the weapon, she would kill the nanny. The chief's daughter's sword was at the woman's throat. The nanny screamed at Alan to run away, so that he would not think about her fate but save the princess. But the guy was indecisive. The full moon was shining in the night sky. Thousands of stars shone through the timid clouds. Along the tent stood a row of torches that dimly illuminated the temporary camp of the Kavat tribe. The guy was lying and seemed to be sleeping on a camp cot. The girl asked herself how it came to this, that she just didn't like this boredom. She remembered the man's words that he promised when the time came to return her to her father. There was a cut on his left hand. She thought he was lying. After all, if he was going to return her, then he might not have kidnapped her at all. The guy said that even if she returned, she would no longer be able to get married, because this marriage will already be completely destroyed. The girl did not understand why then he made her his wife. After all, he didn't have to do this. She sat under the wall and looked at the man with round eyes of fear. Nazar said that this is his freedom, whether she believes it or not. And he answered that he would do everything as he said. Rosetta understood nothing of his words or intentions. The man ordered the girl to sit quietly and do nothing for now. The girl shuddered. She asked if they would be here all the time. He argued that it would be quite cool here at night and therefore sleeping here would be difficult and uncomfortable. He got up from the bed, motioning for the girl to lie down next to him. Rosette was worried. She spoke out against sleeping next to him. She expressed an extreme degree of distrust of him as a person and the situation in general. The man insisted that he was not interested in a child like her. The princess did not understand the phrase about the child. Nazar lay down and covered himself with a blanket and fell silent, stopping the conversation that was useless in his opinion. There was silence. Rosetta admitted to herself that she was cold and wanted to sleep, but she absolutely refused to go to bed next to this man. She decided to sit for now, and then try to escape if even the slightest loophole opened for this. For some time, she reassured herself that everything would be fine and she could return. Curled up, the girl fell asleep right on the floor of the temporary tent, right in her wedding dress. Bare feet approached her. The man easily picked up the soundly sleeping girl in his arms and carried her to the bed. She didn't even understand how it happened, but only lay down more comfortably on the already warm sleeping place, placing her hand under her head. Nazar stood over the sleeping girl and watched as she tossed and turned in her sleep. Then he carefully covered her with the blanket. The man sat next to him on the bed and looked at the sleeping girl. He was pleased with himself. In the backyard of the castle, there was a small garden for Rosetta. The girl stood next to a large old tree. Her parents and older brother and sister were very busy today. Therefore, the little princess constantly spent time in the garden. The girl had a bouquet of daisies in her hands. Rosetta was called by name. The woman asked her where she had been. The girl was happy to see her mother. Her eyes sparkled with joy. The woman asked what her daughter was doing here. The girl claimed that she was playing with Masha. The girl's mother was surprised to hear the name Masha again. She sighed sadly, realizing that her daughter had acquired an imaginary friend through lack of attention. Rosetta assured that Masha was very shy. That's why he only plays with her. She also told her mother something about her friend, and the woman listened to her carefully and asked again. The girl held out a yellow feather in her hand. Her mother admired his beauty. The child said that Masha gives this to her mother. She took the pen in her hands and expressed her delight at the beauty. She said it was lovely and asked if this wonderful creature was still nearby. The girl confirmed. She raised her head and pointed at the tree. There sat a bird with golden feathers. This was the girl's friend Masha. The woman trembled, covering her mouth with her hand in surprise. The girl tried to get her mother out of the stopper. She asked what happened to her. The mother grabbed her daughter in her arms. She said that this might be a good thing. The child did not understand what was happening. It was like a dream. And opening my eyes, it disappeared like a mirage. Rosetta rubbed her sleepy eyes, into which there was bright sunlight. She muttered dissatisfiedly, remembering the details of yesterday evening and night. She sharply opened her eyes and sat up with a jerk. She didn't understand why she was in bed. After all, she remembered very well that she fell asleep on the floor that night. And now I didn't know how it all happened then. Suddenly, the tent flap moved aside. The girl decided that the man had returned and began to hide under the covers. Rosetta saw him coming in with his shirt open. Even among aristocrats, there was no such awkwardness over clothing. The man thought it was good that she had already woken up, and he brought her a full plate of soup. He said that she slept like the dead, and it was good that I didn't have to wake her up. The girl was shocked. She didn't believe that she could sleep so soundly that she didn't even understand when they brought her in, and laid her on the bed. She suggested, wringing her hands, that they were here together. Her gaze became glassy. The man reminded her that he was still not interested in children, just as he had been the night before. He sighed heavily. Rosette snapped that she was not a child, that this year is her coming-of-age ceremony. And here he decided to equate her with children. Riga said that he saw in her a child who cowered in the corner and sobbed. She realized that he was awake and saw everything. The man claimed that he did not invent anything, and he offered her something to eat, aging the plate in front of her. The princess was surprised what color this food was. She was completely unaccustomed to this, where there were mouth-watering pieces and sophisticated table settings. She doubted the quality of the food, fearing that after this she might become ill. She said that she was not hungry and would not eat it. The man insisted that he had no intention of insisting. He said that it was his job to propose and she could do as she wanted, eat or starve. The girl moaned. The man turned to leave, and over his shoulder he asked her if she could survive the journey until the evening hungry. He left, leaving her alone. When Riga left the tent, one of his assistants was already hurrying towards him. He said that he brought what the master asked him for, and he held a woman's fluffy dress with his hand. He asked for forgiveness. He said that he found women's clothing in the village that could fit, but I couldn't find anything new. The leader looked at the dress and touched it with his hands, patting it, knocking the dust off it. After some time, he thanked the assistant and called him well done. Riga brought the dress into the tent. He saw an empty plate next to the girl. It seemed that she was even licked with a tongue. He was pleased that she liked it so much. The girl admitted that she just tried it and couldn't stop, and now she was a little ashamed of her incontinence, and the plate sparkled clean. The man was pleased. He deftly threw the dress onto the bed. The girl stared in disbelief and asked what it was. Riga claimed that it was brought to her from a nearby village to change clothes. After all, she can't wear a wedding dress forever. Rosetta began to look at the outfit. I thought he was quite cute. She touched the lacing of the corset at the back with her fingers. It turned out that this barbarian had prepared both the soup and the dress for her. She looked at him suspiciously, and she couldn't understand why he suddenly cared so much about her. The man was leaving. He told her to hurry up because everyone was already waiting. He said that as soon as she changed clothes, they would hit the road again. Our heroine grabbed the dress by the hem. She thought that if they were leaving here, how difficult it would be. She understood that it would be extremely difficult for Alan to catch up with her. Her body began to tremble and tears appeared in her eyes. The girl called the man and asked him to stop. She began to mumble something and touch her hair. She said that she has thick hair and it can get tangled. Riga clarified what she meant by this. The girl replied that if she changed her clothes, her hair might get tangled. The man still didn't understand her. Rosette asked him to help braid her hair. Riga beckoned her with a gesture, calling her to come closer. He told her to turn her back to him. This made the girl angry. She thought they were calling her like a dog. She was offended that her yesterday's role as a hostage bride had now become a trained dog. But she obediently turned around and stood with her back. The princess began to calm herself down, that she is now not in a position to show her restive character. Very soon the man was skillfully braiding his golden hair into a braid. The girl thought that hands holding only a sword would be rough, but unexpectedly everything was done. The man said ready contentedly, showing the girl a braid with a purple ribbon tied at its end. She thought that this ribbon was on his hair yesterday. The man asked her if something was bothering her. She denied it and thanked her for her help. Riga asked her to return the ribbon to him. The girl answered him angrily, clenching her fists, that she would have returned it to him even without a reminder, so that he would not be afraid that she would steal something from him. The man became a little sad. He told the girl that this was his mother's ribbon. She shuddered, and she mumbled something in response in the form of an apology. The man did not listen to her excuses. He turned to the exit and asked her to change clothes so that she would also go out. He pulled back the tent flap and went outside. Soon Rosetta was dressed in a dress with a brown corset. The men greeted her, wishing good morning to Regina. Another urged Regina to get on her horse quickly. The girl asked what Regina was. The guy was carrying folded bed linen. I told Riga that he needed to pick up evidence of the wedding night. Only now Rosetta understood why the man injured himself. This was to deceive the servants. The man jumped on his horse. The girl thought that no one would say a word to him if he punished his enemies, and she didn't understand why he was protecting her so much. Riga extended his hand, inviting the girl to sit with him. He said that they would already be on their way. Their gazes met. Hand touched hand. Rosetta sat in front of the rider. He told her to hold on tight. He assured her that they would go faster than last time. He grabbed the reins and held the passenger at the same time. The leader commanded forward, and the horsemen set off. Dozens of hooves created a deafening stomp. Long, dark corridor. The woman sighed. She blamed herself that all this happened because of her, and she reproached the guy for not listening to her and not running away. She asked Alan for forgiveness that this old man caught him too, but the guy consoled the nanny that she was not to blame for anything, that he himself was careless and was now to blame. The knight said that even if he left her, it would still be difficult for him to find his way without the help of the tribe. Sighing, the nanny repented of her gullibility. She could not think that the girl would act so treacherously towards them. The knight and the nanny sat on the straw of the cell. The woman claimed that the princess helped the girl, and she threatened the life of her nanny. The guy said that he would never forgive this, and he will definitely punish them all. He clenched his teeth from powerlessness to do anything. But then the floorboard in the corridor creaked. Someone was quietly creeping up to them. The prisoners approached the edge of the cell and began to peer through the bars to see who had come to them. Soon Rosie came up to them. The guy was surprised to see her here. He grabbed the bars and furiously began to ask her why she had come here. The girl asked to be quieter. She claimed that her father didn't know she was here. She brought them bread. She offered them something to eat, since they had been here all day. Alan was surprised that she offered them food when they didn't even know what was wrong with the princess. Rosie convinced them that to escape, they needed to eat well before the journey. The guy trembled at this turn. The girl said that if her father found out where the princess was taken, he would take them into the forest and kill them. She said that they are being closely watched now. Therefore, it will be difficult to get them out of here. Alan was surprised. The girl assured that she would pull them out as soon as such a chance appeared, and she asked them for forgiveness for what she did to them, that she just wanted to prevent senseless victims. Rosie insisted that if they were released, their tribe would suffer. The guy asked why she was helping them now. The girl promised to do everything in her power. Alan asked what would change when she let them go. Reminds me that she interfered with saving the princess, and now let them not think that the kingdom will help them. Rosie said that was why she would let them go on one condition. Alan and the nanny opened their mouths in surprise. The girl demanded that they not talk about the kidnapping of the princess. The knight was indignant. He swore in anger. I was surprised that the scoundrel also offered them a deal. He threatened that when she gets out of the cell, she will definitely no longer live in the world for her betrayal and impudence. The guy hit the bars with all his might, but Rosie calmly answered him that she was not at all afraid of dying to save her tribe. The girl reminded that the knight, however, has something to protect. She held a torch in one hand and clenched the other into a fist with determination. She advised the knight to think carefully. After all, while he is angry, time passes, and the princess could have been lost forever. The knight cursed again, gritting his teeth. He understood that the help of a person with a high position in the army was needed, and saving the princess in secret from the kingdom will not be easy. But if such a person is found, then everything will work out. An idea struck him. He remembered the one who cares about Rosetta and who is able to lead the army. It was Duke Isel Scallion. Rosie was surprised at this decision. After all, I wasn't sure that he was capable of leading an army, but the guy was convinced of it. After all, he was engaged to the princess. Isel was the heir to the Duchy of Hazen, and he could be trusted more than anyone. He had been excellent friends with Rosetta since childhood and had tender feelings for her. Alan reasoned that Hazen was closer than Tara, and speaking of Isel, he can get here faster. The girl then agreed to get in touch with the Duke. The knight began to write a message to Isel with a pen on paper asking for help. When he finished, he held out a roll of paper through the bars of the cell. The guy persistently asked Rosie what happened between her tribe and the Kvat tribe. The girl hesitated. He demanded that she not pretend that she did not understand. He assured her that he had heard something. Rosie sighed and said that now there was no point in hiding, and she agreed to tell him everything she knew in detail. She said that these events happened before she was born, 20 years ago. The horseman galloped through the forest. In front of him sat a girl with a golden braid. She suffered from this endless jump out of habit, and her back ached terribly. The girl is tired. Her whole body was shaking from the rhythmic and strong movements of the animal. She thought that the man would not notice if she leaned her back against his torso. Her body shuddered at the touch. The man nevertheless noticed but did not say anything to her. Although he was surprised, he pressed her hand closer to him. And so they drove for some time. In a small clearing, he ordered a halt. Rosetta was sitting on a stone. She felt so much better. The escort guys looked at the girl with anger and hostility. She swallowed nervously as she felt it. She realized that under such surveillance, it would not be easy for her to escape from them. Riga ordered departure. He ordered me to hurry up. The girl regretted that she had so little rest. She was sad and asked herself how much longer she should suffer like this. But when she approached the horse, she was surprised. There was a soft bedding on the saddle. This made her somewhat happy. She tried the material with her hand. Riga asked her what confused her. The girl admitted that it was too high for her to climb into the saddle herself. The man grabbed her in his arms and helped her sit astride. He looked into her eyes and she looked into his eyes. The girl's heart beat quickly. Its rhythm reverberated in all parts of her body. Riga said that now there will be no problems on the road. They broke camp and continued their mad dash through the forest. Rosetta tried to start a conversation with the man. She asked her to forgive her, and she regretted her words. She said that she didn't know it was so important to him, and that this tape belonged to his late mother. Riga said that she shouldn't worry so much, and that he doesn't value this thing as much as the girl thought. Rosetta was embarrassed that his late mother's thing was not important to him. I was surprised how it was possible. She also understood that if he was a leader, it meant he didn't have a father. The girl asked herself how he lives, and there was clearly something he couldn't tell anyone about. She even felt somehow sorry for him.
She stopped herself, asking what she was suddenly so worried about. It was somehow strange to feel sorry for the man who kidnapped her.
She convinced herself that now she needed to think about escape, and the horses carried them forward. In the clearing in the distance, mountains were visible that were not visible behind the trees before. In the evening, when the sun was already setting, a camp was set up. The men made a fire and pulled up tents to sleep. horses grazed peacefully nearby, and our heroine was sitting on the nearest stone not far from the fire. Rosetta was surprised at the speed with which they set up camp. It seemed to her that they did it in a matter of seconds. They spent the whole day riding horses, and now she really wanted to eat. She was surprised that even in such a situation the feeling of hunger visited her, and at some point her stomach began to growl. The guy asked Riga if he would catch a rabbit for Riga. The girl asked in surprise if they could really eat rabbits. The guy assured that she also ate this in the morning. The guy said that he wanted to deal with breakfast himself, but Riga caught a rabbit for her. I asked if it was tasty. Rosetta regretted eating the cute rabbit. The guy hurried to help the girl. I asked her why she suddenly felt bad. Our heroine changed the topic and asked, why did they start calling her Regina, and what did that even mean? He answered her in surprise that this is what they call the leader's wife. Riga matches its name. The girl was perplexed because the man's name was not Riga, and she asked who Nazar Kvat was then. The leader sat by the fire and straightened the coals in it, checking when it would be possible to cook something on them. The fire hissed and wriggled, licking the stones that lined the fire pit. From what one of the leader's close associates told the girl, she understood something, that strangers call him by the name she had previously heard, and everyone in the tribe calls him Riga. The guy started shouting at his leader that this couldn't be done, so that his wife still doesn't even know the groom's name. It was strange. After all, you need to take care of who you marry. He continued to read the older man. That's the same with today's schedule. I thought it must have been hard for the girl to ride a horse all day. She just sighed in confirmation. The guy was sure that she was already tired on her wedding night, and he believed that we needed to take better care of her than before. Rosette's heart was pounding in her ears. She was so ashamed that they were discussing the details of her night, although nothing even happened. Riga saw his wife's embarrassment. He began to attack the guy, taking him firmly by the shoulder. It's clear that he has a lot of time, that he stands here and wags his tongue. The blonde assured that this was not so and asked for forgiveness. The guy said that this is how all other people see it from the outside, that the girl needs care. He reminded that many were unhappy with this marriage, and by showing that he cares about her personally, others will accept her. Riga interrupted his speech. He asked Shiki if he had already brought wood for the fire. After all, it seems he already sent him for this. The guy assured that this is not important now, understanding the meaning of the finger. The man asked what would happen if Regina froze. That guy grabbed an axe and rushed off like a bullet into the forest, shouting, "I'll bring it now." And the leader was glad that he had sent the chatterbox away to get on with his business. Rosetta, watching this picture, giggled quietly into her fist. She thought the guy was quite funny, but the leader himself remained tense. He turned abruptly to engage in fire again in the middle of their camp. The girl expected him to say at least a word to her, and became sad when he simply remained silent. The fire flared up, hissed, warmed, and brightly illuminated the clearing where they set up camp. Riga continued to methodically tend to the fire, and then the man spoke to the girl. He was ready to tell her about his name. After all, she would have to know anyway. He said his name was Rashid. The girl thought it was quite strange and eerily familiar. Rosetta suddenly remembered, and it even made her shudder. She knew the name. Several years ago, there was a small reception at the king's palace. It was attended by people close to the royal family. The evening had just begun. The king raised a toast with a glass of wine, but then a wandering musician originally from the Ardennes appeared in the hall. It was a brunette with yellow eyes, and everyone became curious about who he was called to sing for. One of the kingdom's musicians was sitting at the piano, and there was a chair near the harp. The guests were in anticipation of something new. Some assumed that the guy would sing the wisdom of the first princess. Others say that he will glorify the prince's bravery. But today, the musician announced something different to them. He said that he would sing for Princess Rosetta. The guy closed his eyes and his fingers touched the strings of the instrument. The song was called Rashid's Light. Melodious music flowed. The guests listened with their mouths open. And when the musician finished his opening speech, all eyes were turned to Rosetta for a second. The girl was a little shy to be the center of attention. She herself listened to the music. Every time the musician's fingers touched the strings of the harp, music flowed throughout the hall. And after the melody came poems with a high syllable. Those words sang the nobility of Princess Rosetta, and the angelic song enchanted everyone. Now the youngest princess was the center of attention. She was applauded and showered with heaps of compliments. The king also applauded, but he didn't understand and asked the question why the song was still called Rashid's Light. The musician thanked His Majesty for the question, bowing. He explained that if you translate the name of the main character of this song in the manner of the Ardennes language, you get Rashid. The girl was surprised that the man who kidnapped her had the same name as her own. The man stood up, straightening his back by the fire. He clarified that her name was Rosie, she confirmed, shuddering a little. He promised that his subordinates would no longer behave as they did yesterday. And whoever she had been until then, they had to accept her as the wife of their leader. The girl told herself that she should wake up and not believe the barbarian's words. But she answered that she would be calm now. She asked if she should thank them and introduce herself. The man claimed that the Quat tribe was different from other tribes, that as long as she was his wife, she was safe. But if she ruins everything herself, they can tear her to pieces like a pack of wolves. Our heroine began to be afraid again. She involuntarily gasped and clutched the hem of her dress in fear just imagining such a picture. Rashid asked the girl to stay here for now, and then he promised to return her to the family. Rosetta didn't know whether to believe it or how she should respond. The girl wondered when she would return. Will her life be the same? After all, now she has lost her value as a bride. And if he returns, he will not be able to live in peace. It was easy to speak without understanding everything, even though they took the wrong bride hostage. But she probably didn't need to play this role. She turned to the leader, and she told him to his face that they would all definitely regret what they had done. This is what she promised them. The guy ran from the forest. He was out of breath and lost his axe somewhere. He called Riga. He shouted that trouble was nearby, that there were monsters nearby. The leader narrowed his eyes. He was worried about those who went hunting. In the moonlight, he examined the blade of his sword. The guy said that people are fighting them now, and he ran to call for help. He was still breathing heavily from running quickly through the forest. The man ordered his wife to stay in the camp and not to leave here. He was sure that the monsters would not come close to the fire, and that way she would be safe. Rosette promised, answering okay and nodding. But I thought that this was just her chance, but she doubted whether she could escape. I stood by the fire alone and thought about making a decision. The leader's sword struck the enemy. Blood sprayed from their mortal wounds. The man asked how much was left. They answered him 5. Rashid ordered to drive the reptiles in one direction. His hand with the sword lived its own special life, delivering sure blows to the target. He ordered 3 assistants to go around on the right, and the rest to attack from behind. And already 3 archers were pulling the bowstring with arrows. The bastards roared with anger. The leader commanded fire, and the arrows flew like lightning towards their targets. Soon the bastards looked like a pillow of pins, so many arrows stuck in their bodies. The guy rejoiced at their luck, but a new monster was approaching from behind. The leader called Nelia, and his sword was already flying straight to the target, hitting the monster and saving the careless boy. The blonde shouted, warning Riga that there was danger behind him. The toothy bastard aimed at the leader's neck. The guy shouted, "Catch!" and threw his sword to him. The man immediately caught and struck another monster to death. The subordinate reported to Riga that several monsters had escaped. The man frowned with displeasure. 3 monsters ran away into the darkness, growling. The guys asked the leader if it was worth catching up with them. He did not give such an order, but suggested counting those who were lying in the clearing. His sword was covered in blood. The blonde noticed out loud that the creatures had become stronger than before. Riga agreed and added that he had never been attacked from behind. The man agreed with Shiki's words. It turned out they could not predict the actions of the monsters. He thought about the girl left in the camp, and now he was afraid for her. After all, it was unknown whether these creatures were afraid of fire. The leader's sword dripped onto the ground with the still fresh blood of the last monster he had slain. The man commanded the return to camp. The girl ran through the impenetrable forest. Raising the hem of her dress, she escaped from the camp lit by fires in a direction unknown to her, looking around cautiously. She was already out of breath from running so fast. Mentally asked to save her. At that moment, she remembered how she ran around the palace as a little girl. She quietly bypassed the guards and ran away. The princess made a lot of efforts to open that creaky door, and she looked around to see if anyone could see her. And having opened the huge door, she wondered whether anyone would be able to find her here if she hid here well. And how fun it will be when the nannies are looking for her everywhere. Her small feet walked down the stairs. She remembered that she had been strictly ordered never to enter this room, but she thought that nothing terrible would happen if she hid here and then came out. But then the girl heard a rustling sound. She covered her head with her hands in fear. Then after waiting, she asked who was there. One of the leader's close people came out from behind a tree. He was surprised why Mistress Regina was wandering around here by herself. He covered his mouth with his hand in horror, and he assumed that she was trying to escape. His eyes sparkled with an evil light. The girl herself began to attack him. She was suspicious of what he was doing here while everyone else was fighting monsters. The guy assured that he didn't have to go there at all. The girl thought that there was finally something uninteresting, but the guy continued to interrogate her whether she tried to escape. She claimed that their camp was attacked by monsters, and while she was running away from them, she got lost in a forest unfamiliar to her. And I thought to myself that I needed to stall for time, in the hope that she would have a chance. The guy approached the girl. He laughed at her. He said that her primitive brain could only think of such a thing to blurt out to him. He doubted that the leader's wife was lost. After all, the camp was in the opposite direction. He continued to advance on the girl. She shuddered with fear. But then Regina pulled herself together. She grabbed the hem of her dress. She said that he seemed to have forgotten that she was the wife of his leader. She threatened that he had better not touch her on purpose. She shook her fist at him with the most determined look.